Welcome to Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching, the podcast that builds on conventional wisdom and adds a fresh perspective on this ever-evolving field of coaching.
Are you fed up with advice that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter or really get you?
Whether you're a reluctant or seasoned leader, this podcast is for you.
Embark on a journey of actionable insights, harness untapped potential, and learn to develop a mindset that will transform you permanently.
Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching, where we shatter boundaries and awaken the confident and compassionate leader within.
Well, welcome to another episode of Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching with Dr. Martin Kettelhut.
Hello.
And myself, Bill Tierney. I'm a results coach and a certified IFS practitioner. Marty, in addition to being a coach, is an author and just recently released a book called
Leadership as Relation.
I've messed that up so many times I wanted you to say it. Leadership as Relation. And it's available on Amazon and anywhere you can buy books, I think,
That's
isn't it?
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Today, just before we hit record, we, as we always do, decided that we'd like to talk about a particular topic. And we have a list that we can draw from. But as you pointed out, Marty, let's talk about something that's up for one or both of us.
Okay.
And the very first thing I said to you when I saw you pop up on Zoom was, I owe you an apology. The reason I owed you an apology was because I was running late. I went to send you a text message saying I'm going to be about 5 minutes late in signing in today, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. But then when I went to send you that text, I realized there was another text that you had sent me last Friday, which I had seen, but didn't respond to immediately. And then it just never got responded to. And what did you say when I said, hey, I owe you an apology and here's why?
I don't remember exactly. What did I say?
Well, you said, yeah, I was wondering about that.
That's right. That's right.
I made some things up about what was going on that you didn't respond.
Precisely.
Yeah. And that's what we do. When the communication is dropped for any reason, we have a tendency to make stuff up. Of course we do. We want to explain things to ourselves. And usually it's not good. I'm guessing the things that you told yourself at least some of them were probably not very empowering.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is something that we've mentioned it from a lot of different angles over the life of this podcast. And it's what Terry Goss calls the human predicament. We're always looking for, what's endangering or what could be improved or what's not quite right about us so that it's important to survive and take notice of that and do something about it. So it's an evolutionary and early evolutionary. Like it doesn't use the frontal cortex, actually. It's more amygdala in our evolution, but it's there and it's automatic.
Mm-hmm. And leads to tremendous problems, even though it's there and it helps us to survive, or at least that's the reason we have that capacity in the first place. Is the capacity to be able to make stuff up, to tell stories, to kind of problem solve and piece together the puzzle is so that we can survive. And yet when we piece together the puzzle and then respond to it as if that's the truth, that often can be problematic.
Right. That's right. Yeah. It is important to note that it's part of us. It's not bad. It has its function. Sometimes it'll save your life, or it'll alert you to something that's not life-saving, but very important. And so the thing is that, these powerful machines we've got up in our heads, we've just got to keep it in perspective. Like, okay, notice that's what I did. I noticed all the reactions. Like, oh, does this mean Bill doesn't like me? Does this mean that I'm unimportant? What is all these things that I made it mean along the lines we've been saying? And then I thought, okay, or now actually this isn't thinking, but this is spirit or higher consciousness or something stepped back from all of those self-incriminating interpretations and said, wait a minute, we don't know what's going on. Let's hold all of those interpretations in abeyance until we know more, and then we can act on it.
Yes. Well, that would require the ability to recognize how important it is to have a space between stimulus and response. And then within that space, to be able to wisely guide ourselves into a response that would leave open the possibility that maybe the story that we've made up about what's going on is not accurate. For years, I didn't know how to do that. There was no space for me. And I know we've talked about this in other episodes where you may recall where I was in my second marriage and my second wife suggested to the psychologist that maybe Bill's depressed and needs to be on antidepressants. Do you remember this story?
Yes, I do.
And of course I resisted. I shouldn't say of course. And I resisted because I don't like being controlled. And I also don't like the idea that if we have a problem, I'm it. So let's fix Bill. That just didn't fly very well for me. And yet I acquiesced. And when I did, I got such great benefit from it. And when I stopped doing the antidepressants, the benefit remained, which was I recognized that there was a space between stimulus and response. Something out there happens, and then I instantly react to it, or something out there happens and I pause in a space in between my reaction and the stimulus and get a choice. I get to choose about how I'm going to respond. Talked about two different things here, but they're directly related. One thing is I dropped the ball on communications like I did with you last Friday.
Right.
Other side of that, let's call it a mathematical equation, is the result of that is that you were impacted by it. And now we could continue the mathematical equation, because had you reacted to that in a way that reflected your hurt or your story that you made up about it, then that might have created an additional piece of drama that there was to deal with. If neither one of us knew how to pause in between stimulus and only responded, chances are we wouldn't like each other very well.
Right. And you see a lot of that in TV and in the news. I mean, it is by far the standard way of being. It's not extraordinary in any way.
It's more stimulus reaction than stimulus response. And response means I am responsible. I'm able to respond because I've paused long enough to measure my response, to decide, how do I want to respond to this? Do I want to go with my negative, disempowering story about how the person doesn't like me or what they meant by that? Or do I want to do something different that might be informed by reality instead of my story about reality?
Yes. Right. It's good. I think I'm inclined to just take a pause in the conversation right there, because that we want to practice taking these pauses in our thinking so that we have space between, what's happening and our response. That, just get in the practice of just going, okay, what do I, the true me, self, have, what does it say to this, rather than, just having that an automatic reaction that does not create anything new in the world, but just perpetuates whatever conflicts are there.
Right. Yeah. So how do you practice it? For me, when I first went on antidepressants, by the way, I was about 42 years old at that time. I'd had that much experience of reacting to whatever happened out there without any kind of pause or space inside. 42 years of it. And that 42 years was packed with a lot of trauma, a lot of hurt, a lot of disappointment, a lot of discouragement, a lot of crazy things happening in my life and in the world. So 42 years of programming now was interrupted by the chemicals, apparently, that were mixed together in that antidepressant pill that I took. And somehow the effect on me was that I noticed a space that I'd never seen before.
Mhm.
I noticed that I had some choice. I had a choice to make. It wasn't just simply reacting. But not everybody's going to have that experience, whether they are on antidepressants or not. Not
Right.
everybody's going to have that. How long have you known that there was a space that you could pause in?
You know, when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I think I trust it because of that, is when I was a student at so I'm already 30-ish years old is when it was. I was living in New York City, and I took a course at what's called the School of Practical Philosophy. Um, they also they exist elsewhere besides New York City, but that's where I encountered them. And basically, it's a course in meditation. It's called the School of Practical Philosophy. You start out learning a lot about what, ancient Eastern as well as more modern Western thinkers have thought about meditation and about the mind and how to create space and all of this. And by the end of the course, they've got you practicing meditation. And one of the things, and I'm sorry, I'm making this a little bit longer story, but we had to have a sit with the teacher just privately. And the teacher would watch us go into meditation. And there's, you wonder like, well, what is there to watch? Just somebody sitting in a chair, but you can tell if you're an experienced meditator, you can tell if somebody is actually dropping in or if they're just sitting there thinking. You can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other things that I'm not even aware of that my teacher was checking during that time. And I remember that this was a very good discipline. Like taking a test in school. You cram and you memorize and you get your mind clear and you get a good night's rest. Like it's good exercise to have your meditation checked because you got to do it well, basically. And so it makes you focus. And I remember, this is the answer to your question. I remember in those moments with the teacher watching me meditate that, thoughts would come in like, oh my God, am I doing this right? How silly is this? What's she thinking? Sometimes it was a she. And, all of these thoughts, and I'm like, wait, that's not meditating. And so that was where I first stuck to the mantra, and that space opened up between what I was thinking and my just pure awareness, right? And that I remember it was the most ecstatic and peaceful feeling at the same time to just see like, oh, I've got all these thoughts, but I'm doing the mantra because I'm being checked on my meditation here. That's when that space opened up for me.
And you were in your early 30s, it sounds like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to a little quicker than I did. It was 42 for me with the antidepressants, and then really another 2 years beyond that before I recognized that without the help of the antidepressants, I still had the ability to do that. And you said something really important there that I hadn't really considered. One is there's the thing that happens out there, the stimulus, and then I've been talking about, and then there's the response and the space in between. But there's another element of it. You said that you noticed your thinking, and it's actually thinking that can be that thing that happens out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What's happening in here, it's still a thing out there that's happening to that inner potential of inner awareness.
exactly. Right. And it's that ability to see our own thoughts as objects
Yes.
rather than the truth or ourself.
It's just one more thing that we could just react to. Or we can respond to our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And that response could simply be thank you.
Right.
Next. Or
A lot of times we were taught in the school, a good practice is to say, as the ancients did in Sanskrit, neti neti, not this, not this,
yes,
to the thought,
Yeah.
Like, no, not that. I want the peace. I want the deeper understanding. I want the perspective. I want the intuition, not this, neti neti.
Yeah.
I practice that in everyday conversation, like when the person, this happened to me yesterday, a person pulled out into my lane from a side street into my lane and was right in front of me at going like 20 miles an hour. I'm coming down a 45-mile-an-hour road. I'm like, all kinds of thoughts jumped into my brain, right? And I was just like, okay, this is a great occasion for neti neti. Like, just not this. I'm just not even gonna go into this. This isn't important. This isn't something for me to get riled up about or cause an accident because of. Just neti neti to the whole thing. Yeah.
I've been thinking about a particular client that I spoke with, who said, I am just terrible at communication. And I started telling you a little bit about this before we hit record. And so I said, why do you say that? What's the evidence that you're terrible at communication? And so she gave me an example that her husband had sent her a text at work. She's very busy at work. She sees the text, realizes that it deserves more of an answer than she has time to give it right now. So she tells herself, I'll respond to it later. But because of the nature of text messaging, once you've looked at them, that little dot that says you have a text message to read disappears. And so
I have the same problem, so I'm laughing at myself here.
Yeah. So now she's looked at the text, and it's gone away. It's still she can find it.
Sure.
But just like an hour ago when I texted you to say I'm going to be 5 minutes late today, I didn't remember at all. There was nothing in my brain at all, nothing in my memory that I had seen a text from you that I needed to respond to, until I pulled your contact up to send you that text to say I'd be 5 minutes late, and there it was. And oh shit, did I respond to that? Did I even read it? And I realized I didn't. I scanned it quickly, but it required, like my client, it required more of a response than I had time for, apparently, last Friday when you sent that. And so I never got around to responding. Now, with my client, I said, all right, there's a couple of things that I can do, that we can do in this conversation here. I can offer you a couple of ideas on, structural things that you could do so that you don't forget an important text again in the future. Do you want to talk about that?
That's one way to go about it.
Yeah. So we did that, and we came up with a couple of ideas, and you and I both agreed on that. One of the things that came up in that conversation with her was exactly the same thing that you and I both do. If I see a text often that I don't have time to respond to, I will just copy it and paste it into an email to myself, where it will remain in my inbox no matter how many times I look at it, until I've actually completed it and resolved it. That's what you do too, it sounds like.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly.
The other idea that we came up with was, I know on Apple phones and maybe on some of the other phones as well, there is an app for taking notes, and to copy and paste in any 10-hour period of time while you're working, any text that you want to get back to later, and then get in the disciplined habit, if you can remember to do this, of opening up that note at the end of the day and respond to every one of those texts. She agreed that might be a good method as well. And I said, okay, well, problem solved. And we still had 55 minutes left in the session. A little bit of an exaggeration, but we still had a lot of time in the session. So I just waited, and she said, but that doesn't really get to all of it. Oh, okay, tell me more. She said, well, my husband reacted as if I intentionally ignored him. Now we have something else to talk about. And that is, without the structure, it was not malicious. She didn't intend to ignore him, but even though they have a great relationship, they have a really good communication most of the time, occasionally this sort of thing will happen. And when it does, he will respond from a place of insecurity and make up that she doesn't care, similar to the things that you said you made up about me. He made up about her. And then it creates this tension between them. So that when he says, why didn't you return my text? And I think that's the way it goes. She's, oh, I forgot all about it. You forgot, huh? And so there's this tension between them, and it takes some work to get it back to breaking even again, at least.
Sure.
Back to connection again. So that's something else I think that needs to be talked about here, is that when we do have a breakdown in communication, of course, we can find some way to fix that so that it doesn't happen again in the future. But in the meantime, when we drop the ball and we don't communicate, and that could take many, many, many forms, how do you clean that up? How do you make those repairs?
By the way, before I answer that, there's another example. I just of what we were saying earlier about the need to have pauses, and so we can get in practice of seeing what's going on in our own mind. We have so much going on.
Yeah.
All of us have so much going on that, we're trying to structure it so that we can have even more going on, right? And I just, I just want to not necessarily pass judgment on that, but just notice what we're doing here, maybe we could be more in the kind of communication we want to be if we weren't so rushed, smashed up against one event to the next. Okay, enough of that soapbox.
Actually, no, if you don't mind, Marty, let's stay there for a minute. I think that's really valid what you just said, and I'll tell you what it makes me think of is recognizing that this has been the most amazing, successful, busy year for me so far.
Yeah.
As of this recording, we are wrapping up July 2024. I've had a breakout year this year. For 7 consistent months, I've done more coaching than I've ever done in the 14 years that I've been coaching.
Wow.
By far. Stand out, no comparison. And of course, I love that.
Not more collectively than in the last 14 years, but this year compared to any year in the past.
That's right. Thanks for that clarification. Yes. Yeah. I can take any one of those previous 13 years and compare it to this year. And the 7 months that I've completed so far this year exceeds all but one of those full 12-month years.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's been great. What a fun game. I think you've heard me say that. Just owning a business can be just hell and tortuous, or it can be a fun game. And I've had both. This year, it's been a fun. What a great game to play. I've got a scoreboard. I keep track. I'm just so excited about finally figuring some things out about how to reach my target clients. I've had a lot of help with that, and things are gelling, and I just am so delighted about that. However, given that I do have a limited capacity, like everybody I know, what this very full and busy year has done is pushed me to using much more of my capacity than I'm accustomed to. And I haven't answered the question, am I using too much of my capacity, or do I just need to learn how to operate at this level of use of my capacity? I haven't answered.
Great question. It's a really important question. Yeah.
But what I have done as I've leaned in the direction of, I think I may be using too much of my capacity, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of room left for relaxing and enjoying and connecting and restoring.
Yeah.
So what I've done is some adjustments in my schedule, which have taken a little while to catch up. I began making these adjustments about 4 weeks ago, and starting, I think it's next week, I'll begin to enjoy the benefits of that, where I'm cutting back on the number of days that I offer sessions and the number of hours that I'm offering them, and I'm building in a break in between in the middle of every single day, so that I have time to breathe more deeply and to do things like returning text messages that I otherwise might miss. In other words, I'm not packing so much in.
Right.
I can't.
Next week you have 2 days off. I know.
Yeah, that's right. You and I are traveling. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, so that structurally is important. Number one, to recognize, like in the game, The Inner Game of Tennis, the book I'm listening to right now by W. Timothy Galway. Excellent book, highly recommended, and I'm not even a tennis player. Start with what is so? What's actually happening? Well, what's actually happening is I'm working this many hours, and I have this much time outside of work, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. That's where I started. That's what is so. Now, what do I want to do about that? And what I did was made some adjustments to my schedule. I'm continuing to make some adjustments to my schedule now, because I realized just how valuable and important it is for me to have room to breathe fully, time to spend fully connected and engaged and present in whatever I want to give my attention to, other than this fun game of work. So I'm glad you brought that up.
By the way, if I might, I think that's exactly where we want to go with the answer to the question, what do you do when you make these kind of bad communications or missed communications, like your client? Start with what's so. Start with what's so, like what actually happened.
So when she went there, this particular client that I'm talking about, she said, there's more to it. I said, oh, great, let's talk about that. She said, the truth is that the text that I received from him triggered me. And I didn't want to respond from being triggered. So ironically, she was responsible enough to know that if she responded from the trigger, it was going to start a fight. It was going to create tension and disconnection between her and her husband.
Right.
So what she did instead was she said, I'm going to pause and give myself time to really give this attention when I'm not in the middle of trying to work.
Very good.
Very good, except.
And what?
Except she forgot.
He's still hanging out there on the skinny branches.
Exactly. And she forgot to respond. Yeah. She didn't respond until she got home. And then he said, what's up? Why did you ignore me? So that's an important piece. That's one of the reasons I would wait to respond to a text, is because it requires more of my attention than just a real quick, yeah, gotcha, or thumbs up, or a heart, or something like that. Just to show that I've read it and I'm responding and just get it off my plate. Yeah. He deserves, wow, that's great news. Man, oh man, how excited you must be that you shared that with me. Thanks so much, which is what was appropriate for how I felt when I read your text on Friday.
And so it's going to be really good news to him, the husband, when he hears what's so here is that there's more to this that I wanted to discuss, and it actually triggered me a little, so I didn't want to respond in that way. So I'm glad you brought it back up. I'm sorry I didn't respond immediately, and now let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly so. And if it's a highly skilled couple that's very well skilled in communication and assuming the best about each other, even though parts might show up that says, oh, she doesn't love me, or he doesn't love me, or they don't care, those parts can be led in a wise adult way to just relax a little bit and let the adults work it out. And then those parts will watch as the adults do work it out and lovingly find their way back to connection again.
I think that knowing that there's a connection back to which to get, to get back to is so important. Even if you're talking, even if it's a stranger, there is a back to connection to get to. Even if it's a stranger, I would submit. And then there's a whole spectrum of, acquaintance, friend, lover, intimate. There's a spectrum. But I think one of the reasons why we become bad communicators is because we have this view. It's like a zero sum, like communication is a zero sum game. And if you're right, then I'm wrong, or kind of thing. Or, if I owe you an apology, then you're king and I'm servant. Like, it's just, we have this, and that is to completely forget that we are connected, we are whole, we are, self, all of us. And if we don't know that going into a relationship or even just a conversation, then there's going to be this zero-sum feel to it.
Very well said. And now that reminds me of another client from about a year or so ago, who discovered in one of our IFS sessions that he had a part that had taken on the belief from an experience that he had with his father, with a series of events throughout his childhood, that if he disagreed with his father was punitive and disconnected from him.
Mm-hmm.
So what he learned was agreement equals connection and approval. Disagreement equals disconnection and disapproval. And that really got in there. Mm-hmm. So now, as I recall, he had something very important to be talking about with people, and he could no longer just comply and people please and shake his head and act like he agreed when he didn't. Mm-hmm. And found that it just really stirred a lot inside of him to consider actually saying, no, in fact, I don't agree with what you're saying. I hold a different position than you do. He could rarely get himself to do it. And when he did it, he came at it with so much force that it usually alienated the other person.
I see.
In other words, the fear of breaking that rule and risking disconnection, rejection, and disapproval was layered over by a leather jacket holding part, wearing part, that showed up with anger. No, I agree. I feel this way. And it's almost like, go away. I know you're going to go away anyhow. So here's my parting gift to you. F you. I disagree. I never want to talk to you again. So obviously that's a big problem in someone's life. And it's a great thing to bring to coaching. And what he discovered in that conversation was it was a very young part of him that was still reacting to dad. And that his adult life had demonstrated to him. Once we got talking about it, he saw that in his adult life, it was clear that people actually in the world, there are people that are capable of disagreeing and staying connected. That is a real possibility in conversations. Isn't that amazing?
Yes. Yes, it is.
But I want to make the point from that client, and actually several clients that have come to me with those kinds of dilemmas, that if we are programmed, if we have taken on beliefs that make it unsafe to disagree, to be our own persons, to say what's on our mind, if we've learned that it's going to be painful to tell the truth, that's going to take a real toll on our ability to make it very difficult to communicate effectively. Because dishonest communication is really poor communication, almost as bad as no communication, maybe worse.
Well, this is another, I think the second thing that I would say in answer to your question, like, how do we do, repair when the communication's gone bad? Besides getting what's actually so about it, which often, once we know that, it pretty much fixes itself. Yeah. But coming from commitment, like asking yourself, like, what am I really committed to? Like, not what's going on in my head, but what am I committed to here? Right? This is my wife, like, or this is my spouse. Like, I'm not committed to making them feel bad. I'm not committed to being alienated from them. What am I committed to? And when you can come from that place, it shifts everything.
I would say even, I'm not even committed to making them feel good. I'm committed to staying connected. I'm committed to loving them.
It could be that, right? Right? Or it could be, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm committed to the design of this architecture project.
Yes.
Yeah, and whether they like it or not, I think this is an important architectural idea to get out there in the world. I just started the novel Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and that's what the main they're wrestling with.
Boy, that's a great novel. I bet you it's been 30 years since I read that. Wow.
I don't think I'm gonna like it, but I think I should read it. This is just a quick parenthetical because my book is about a reality of relations, and hers, Ayn Rand's reality, is one of individuals.
Mhm.
And so I feel like I need to know where she's coming from so I can speak to individualists. But I don't plan on liking this book anyway.
We don't plan on it.
But that's another example of, like, I can see my mind doesn't plan on liking it, but I have a commitment to understanding.
She's a great storyteller. And before we end here, I think we need to bring that in, is that the stories that we tell
Mhm.
often are the winners of what we end up doing in terms of our response or reaction. If we simply go with our stories and don't go back to, well, what is actually so? This is maybe a dumb example of this, but I put in the sprinkler system in this house that I live in with my wife when I moved in 10 years ago.
For fires?
No, for the landscape in the backyard.
Oh, in the lawn. Okay.
And when I first moved in, there was nothing but dead grass back there. No gardens, nothing. No trees, nothing. A space about 50 by 50. So what is that? 2,500 square feet. And so for the first couple of years, we just used manual sprinklers, and it was just so time consuming and inefficient. So finally saved up some money, bought the equipment and materials, and put in a sprinkler system, which I designed myself. Pretty proud of myself until I found out that it didn't work very well because it wasn't designed well. I didn't really do the research. I was the typical do-it-yourselfer who just thought I can do this without, and I'm just going to make it up as I go along, which I did. And it looked like it was working just fine, except that now there's brown spots. And now my wife wants to add a back garden. And now we want to add a raised bed, and now another raised bed, and now another raised bed, another side garden. Well, there's 4 stations back there, and every one of them are designed for lawn. You don't put water on lawns the same way you put water in gardens. It requires a lot of different considerations. Now, all these years later, with all these modifications, the entire sprinkler system needs to be redone. I didn't really deal with what was so then, and now this is an unsolvable problem until I start with what is so now. So earlier this week, I took out some graph paper and a long measuring tape and made notes. What sprinklers are where and how far apart are they, and what area do they need to cover? And I'm humble enough, finally, I've been beaten into humility, to go across the street to my neighbor who's constantly taking care of his beautiful lawn over there and asked him for help. So what is so actually requires a little bit of humility for me sometimes. Like I got to let go of my story about what is so.
All of us. I mean, I know that the last time I was asked this line of questions in a coaching call by my coach, I could not get the two peeled apart, like how I felt about it and the facts. No, the fact is he insulted me. Wait a minute. That's not a fact. That's an interpretation for sure. But I just couldn't get it at first.
Right.
So you're right. It takes humility.
And how would you define humility? I'm asking because I love it. I have a definition I love.
Well, then I'd love to hear that first.
Yeah, good. Let me not put you at a disadvantage. So mine is knowing who I really am.
That feels like it would pretty much cover it. I was going to say something along the lines of not coming from ego, which it's sort of like the flip side of what you said. It means the same thing in a way.
Yeah. If ego is the false or shame identity, absolutely, that's not who I am.
Ego could be any random thought happens to be going through your head. Like That's all ego, right? And that those thoughts are coming and going from, I want to stab that mofo in the back, which you don't, which you would never do, to, aren't I the most wonderful being ever to have been placed on this planet, which is also BS, you know?
Always enjoy our conversations, Marty. I sometimes think, we should be more prepared, and maybe some of the listeners think the same thing, and maybe they're right if they do. But the fact is that we show up with an idea or a list, and then we just have conversations and generate them from our past, our experience, our work with our clients. And if people enjoy these conversations half as much as I do, then great. But I just love the conversations that you and I have. It always just activates a lot of positive, fun energy in me, and I just appreciate you so much.
Oh, it goes both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. And we'll talk later in the week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.
That concludes another episode of Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to fuel your leadership journey.
Remember, true leadership is not about you. It's about empowering others.
Take your insights to heart and cultivate a leadership mindset that will transform you from within.
Thank you for joining us on this quest to leadership excellence. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we delve deeper into the art of leadership.
Until next time, remember that you have the power to lead with confidence and compassion from the inside out.